Here we have Andy, the famous rig by Joe Doublestein, sitting in the kitchen that was modeled by Jeremy Byrne. And this is a lighting exercise. If you render it, it looks like this and renders pretty fast. Now, we want to have some smoke in this room. We could think, okay, let's go to our render settings, go to the Arnold renderer in the environment and throw in some AI atmosphere volume. And it works if we give it some density, a little bit of density. It works, but it does not really work with the directional light or with the sky dome, because those are infinitely far away and they have to penetrate the whole volume, because the volume exists in the entire scene, not just in the room. We just want smoke in the room. So this is not what we want. So let's take that out again. Let's break the connection and instead create a volume in the room that has smoke in it. So I'm going to, in top view, build a cube, the size of the room. There we go, and then we're going to put it up. It's not quite right, but this is about, you want to have it more exact than this. So now we have a volume that is filling the entire room. We want to put some kind of shader on it, and it absolutely doesn't matter what we put on there. We could even put a background shader on there. We actually put a shader on there to get the shading group, get it in its own shading group. So I'm going to go to Hypershade, and in Hypershade I'm going to try and find that background I just put on there. There we go. Let's graph that network. So we have the AI background, and we're going to rename this shader group Smoke Shader Group. And we're going to get rid of the Use AI background. We just want a volume shader in this shading group. So we're going to connect a Arnold shader volume AI standard volume to the smoke shader group, and this is going to be AI smoke for now. We have the volume shader on this cube. It turns ugly green. That's annoying. Let's take that cube. Let's also call it smoke volume. And we want to do a few things. If we render the scene now, we won't see anything because this cube will be blocking everything. So we want to turn off cast shadows on the block. And we don't need the smoke to cast shadows in this case, which sometimes you want, and then you want to make some kind of transparent shader on it. The other thing you want to do, to enable volume rendering, you need to activate the step size. And step size is relative to the size of the cube. This is a rather big cube, so let's start with a step size of 10, which is sort of appropriate for this. So the bigger the step size, the rougher the render, but also the faster, way faster. A step size of 10 is like 100 times faster than a step size of 1. Well, not quite, but sort of. A lot faster. So we now have the volume, we have a step size. It's ugly green, so let's do one more thing. In the shape node, let's go to the drawing overrides, enable drawing overrides in the display options, and set the level of detail to bounding box, so it just shows up as an empty cube. Let's then go to our render cam, and let's go to the AI smoke. It renders completely black because the density is way too high. Let's put the density on 0.01, for instance, and we get a nice smoke volume. It's kind of even, So let's make that noisy. We can drive the density with a noise function. The way I would put that in there is by going to Hypershade. There's my smoke. I would want a noise, 3D noise in there, for instance, volume noise. You can use AI noise, which renders really fast, but doesn't have as many options. And let's take a wispy noise, and let's make it sort of elongated. So nice and long. And we want to use, let's bigify this. We want to use one of the colors to density, but we don't want to put it in there directly. We want to, and I hit tab to do that, remap value. Put a remap value in between so we can adjust the amount of density easily. So I'm just going to take red, for instance. Doesn't really matter because it's black and white. And the out value is going to go into density. And in my remap value, I'm going to set the maximum output of the remap value to that 0.1, I think it was 0.1, that I had for the density originally. And now the noise should appear in the smoke. The size of the noise, of course, is determined by this fun, let's stop it for a second, by this fun place 3D texture, which is probably way too small, so let's make this a bit bigger. My scene is huge. And you start seeing the noise in there. And this is great, but it renders really slow. Why does it render really slow? Because for all the points in the smoke, it has to gather the light and evaluate the shaders that it hits. So shaders gets evaluated a lot. Another issue is that this little fill light over there is shining a nice volumetric cone into my scene, but I do not want to see that. That's just there to get a little light on him. So I would like to limit the amount of lights that hit the volume. And if I select the volume, because this renders really slowly, if I select the volume and hit render selection only, I get just the smoke and it renders way faster. This render took 9 minutes and 33 seconds on my machine to finish, and that's really long. The image without smoke only took 2 minutes 25. This image with smoke only rendered in just 1 minute 50, making the total render time of the without and with smoke to about 4 minutes, whereas the full image renders in 9:33, and that is because as it renders the volume with all the shaders, it has to evaluate the shaders at every step along the way, making it really slow. So what I want to do is create a render layer with just the smoke and composite it on. How to set the render layer will be next.